Imagine standing exactly where two giants are fighting. What would you do if you were caught between the world's largest economic powers, with $123 billion hanging in the balance and your entire future at stake? This isn't fiction. This is Vietnam in 2025. Today, we're diving into the high-stakes game of economic survival where one Southeast Asian nation has transformed from war-torn landscape to global manufacturing powerhouse, only to find itself at the center of history's most consequential trade war. How does a country of 100 million people navigate between a 145% tariff threat from one superpower and the gravitational pull of another? Welcome to Story-Driven English, where we don't just teach you vocabulary. We immerse you in the real-world dramas reshaping our global economy while naturally enhancing your English fluency. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell right now, because our unique approach combines compelling storytelling with natural English learning that you won't find anywhere else. Our community of over 100,000 English learners can't be wrong. Whether you're preparing for business English, academic success, or simply want to understand global affairs in English, today's story about Vietnam's remarkable economic balancing act will equip you with sophisticated vocabulary and insights you can use immediately. So settle in as we follow Minh, a Vietnamese CEO caught in the crossfire of global trade tensions, and discover how one nation turns crisis into opportunity. Vietnam, Between Giants, a tale of economic navigation, starts right now. Vietnam, Between Giants, a tale of economic navigation. In the quiet dawn of 2025, Minh stood at the expansive window of his office in Hanoi's financial district, watching the city come alive beneath him. As the CEO of a growing electronics manufacturing company, he had witnessed Vietnam's remarkable transformation over the past decade. The skyline before him, once dominated by colonial architecture and modest structures, now featured gleaming skyscrapers housing multinational corporations. The streets below buzzed with motorbikes and modern cars, a testament to Vietnam's rising prosperity. Minh's company, Vintech Solutions, had grown from a small assembly operation to a key supplier for global technology giants. This morning, he was preparing for a pivotal board meeting to address the latest challenge facing Vietnam's business landscape: escalating tensions in the U.S.-China trade war and Vietnam's precarious position between these economic superpowers. "Good morning, Mr. Minh," said Lin, his assistant, as she entered with a folder of reports. "I've compiled the latest analyses on the trade situation. The American delegation will arrive at 10 a.m., and the Chinese representatives at 2 p.m. Minh nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Lin. It seems we've become quite popular these days." Lin smiled at his understatement. Vietnam had indeed become the focus of intense interest from both Washington and Beijing, each courting the Southeast Asian nation for their own strategic purposes in what journalists were calling the new battleground of the U.S.-China trade war. As Minh reviewed the reports, he reflected on how Vietnam had arrived at this consequential juncture. Once primarily known for agriculture and basic manufacturing, Vietnam had strategically positioned itself as an attractive alternative to China for global supply chains. When the first Trump administration imposed substantial tariffs on Chinese goods in 2018, Vietnam had been a significant beneficiary, seeing exports to the U.S. surge by 35% in 2019 alone. Companies producing goods in China quickly turned to Vietnam, establishing new facilities in industrial parks like the one in Quang Ninh province. Over the following years, this trend accelerated, bringing high-tech manufacturing to Vietnam, including facilities established by Apple suppliers Pegatron and Foxconn. What had once been predominantly low-value assembly had evolved into sophisticated production operations. By 2024, manufacturing accounted for more than one-fifth of Vietnam's GDP, becoming a critical driver in the government's ambitious 8% growth target for 2025. Minh's own company embodied this evolution. Starting with simple electronics assembly, Vintech had invested in training and technology, gradually moving up the value chain. Now they produced advanced components for global technology firms, employing thousands of skilled workers across several facilities. The sudden knock on his door interrupted Minh's thoughts. It was Tran, his chief financial officer, looking concerned. "Have you seen the latest statements from Washington?" Tran asked, placing a tablet on Minh's desk. The screen displayed headlines about President Trump's new reciprocal tariffs, targeting countries with large trade surpluses with the U.S. Vietnam was facing a potential 46% tariff rate. "I have," Minh replied calmly. "But the implementation has been paused for 90 days while negotiations continue. This is why today's meetings are so important." The situation was indeed delicate. Vietnam's trade surplus with the U.S. had grown to an impressive $123.5 billion in 2024, more than triple the $38 billion recorded in 2017. This surge was largely attributed to the manufacturing exodus from China, as companies sought to bypass American tariffs by relocating to Vietnam. This remarkable success had now placed Vietnam squarely in the crosshairs of America's trade policies. At the same time, Vietnam remained deeply integrated with China's economy. Chinese firms had become major investors in Vietnam, rising from Vietnam's ninth-largest investor in 2014 to sixth in 2023. China was also Vietnam's largest trading partner and primary import source, supplying essential raw materials and intermediate goods for Vietnam's manufacturing sector. In 2024, Vietnamese imports from China closely matched the value of its exports to the U.S., a relationship that had not gone unnoticed by American trade officials. "The Americans suspect we're just a backdoor for Chinese products," Tran said, voicing a common concern. "They claim that some exports are merely Vietnam-washed Chinese goods." Minh nodded. This was indeed part of a complex reality. While most of Vietnam's manufacturing growth represented genuine value addition, estimates suggested that about 16% involved rerouting or minimal processing of Chinese products. This had become a significant point of contention with the U.S. administration. The intercom buzzed, and Lin announced that the American delegation had arrived early. Minh straightened his tie and prepared to welcome them. As he walked toward the conference room, he mentally reviewed Vietnam's precarious position and the careful diplomacy it required. The American delegation was led by a senior representative from the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, accompanied by economic analysts and business executives interested in Vietnam's market. After formal introductions, they moved quickly to the heart of the matter. "Vietnam's remarkable economic growth has been impressive," the American trade representative began diplomatically. "But the administration has concerns about the nature of your trade surplus with the United States. At $123.5 billion, it's the third largest in the world, after China and Mexico." Minh nodded respectfully. We understand your concerns. Vietnam has benefited from global supply chain shifts, but we're committed to building a balanced and sustainable trade relationship with the United States. The American representative continued, "Our particular concern is the possibility that Chinese goods are being minimally processed here before being labeled as made in Vietnam to circumvent U.S. tariffs on China. We've detected patterns suggesting this practice." "We take these concerns seriously," Minh responded. "Our government has already begun tightening enforcement of rules of origin and increasing local content requirements. Vintech, like many Vietnamese companies, is investing heavily in expanding our true manufacturing capabilities, not just assembly." The conversation shifted to concrete actions. Minh outlined Vietnam's recent trade agreements with American companies, including $4.15 billion in contracts signed in March 2025 between Vietnamese oil and gas companies and American counterparts for purchasing liquefied natural gas, power plant equipment, and biofuels. Vietnam is also creating opportunities for American technology companies, Minh added. "We recently signed an agreement with NVIDIA to establish an AI research center here, and companies like Intel are expanding their operations." The American delegation seemed cautiously appreciative of these efforts, but their message was clear. Vietnam needed to address the trade imbalance and ensure that its exports truly represented Vietnamese value addition, not Chinese products in disguise. As the morning meeting concluded and Minh saw the Americans out, he felt the weight of navigating these complex international waters. There was little time to reflect, however, as the Chinese delegation would arrive shortly. When the Chinese representatives entered the conference room that afternoon, the atmosphere carried a different tenor. Led by a high-ranking official from China's Ministry of Commerce, the delegation projected confidence despite the challenges China faced in global trade. "Vietnam has been a reliable partner in regional development," the Chinese official began warmly. "President Xi's recent visit to Hanoi, his second in less than 18 months, demonstrates the importance we place on our relationship." Minh acknowledged this with a polite nod. President Xi's April 2025 visit had indeed highlighted China's desire to strengthen ties with Vietnam amid growing U.S. trade pressures. During that visit, China and Vietnam had signed dozens of cooperation agreements on enhancing supply chains and railway development. China is facing unprecedented 145% tariff rates from the United States, the Chinese official continued, while Vietnam has the opportunity to negotiate a reduction of the proposed 46% tariff. "We see potential for deeper cooperation that benefits both our nations." The subtext was clear. China hoped Vietnam would continue to serve as a manufacturing partner and trade conduit while American pressure mounted. The Chinese delegation outlined proposals for expanded investment in Vietnam's manufacturing sector, particularly in electronics and high-tech industries. "Our companies have contributed significantly to Vietnam's industrial development," the Chinese official noted. "Chinese investments have created jobs and brought technology transfer. We hope to build on this foundation." Minh acknowledged the importance of Chinese investment but carefully emphasized Vietnam's balanced approach. Vietnam values its economic partnership with China while developing relationships with multiple international partners. "Our goal is sustainable development that benefits the Vietnamese people." As the Chinese delegation departed, Minh returned to his office, contemplating the day's discussions. Both meetings highlighted Vietnam's unique position at the intersection of global economic powers. That evening, Minh convened his executive team to discuss their strategy moving forward. The boardroom overlooked Hanoi's West Lake, now glittering with the lights of luxury developments that symbolized Vietnam's economic aspirations. "We need to navigate these trade tensions carefully," Minh began. Both meetings today confirmed what we already knew. Vietnam has become a focal point in the U.S.-China economic competition. Tran, the CFO, pulled up the latest economic projections on the screen. If Trump's reciprocal tariffs take effect at the proposed rate, we could see our exports to the U.S. fall significantly. Economists estimate it could reduce Vietnam's overall export growth by 1.5 to 2 percentage points and cut GDP growth by 0.2 to 0.3 percentage points this year. "And that's just the direct impact," added Hai, the operations director. "The uncertainty might also discourage new foreign investments. Several potential investors I've spoken with are holding off on decisions until the trade situation clarifies." Minh considered this sobering assessment. "We need to approach this as both a challenge and an opportunity. Vietnamese businesses have proven resilient before." He moved to the whiteboard and outlined a three-part strategy. First, we accelerate our efforts to increase true Vietnamese content in our products. That means developing local supply chains and reducing dependence on Chinese imports where possible. Second, he continued, we diversify our export markets beyond the United States. The European Union, Japan, and Southeast Asian neighbors offer growth potential. And third, we focus on moving up the value chain. Rather than competing solely on cost, we invest in innovation and quality. Vintech should aim to become known for advanced manufacturing, not just assembly. The team nodded in agreement, though the challenges ahead were formidable. Vietnam's rise as a manufacturing hub had been meteoric, but its position between competing superpowers required careful balancing. The following day, Minh visited one of Vinteca's manufacturing facilities on the outskirts of Hanoi. The modern factory hummed with activity as workers and automated systems assembled electronic components. Minh felt pride in what they had built but knew that the future demanded more. To thrive in the changing global environment, Vietnamese companies would need to transform from assembly operations to true innovation centers. He met with young engineers who were developing new manufacturing processes and product designs. Their enthusiasm reflected Vietnam's broader ambitions, to leverage its manufacturing success as a stepping stone toward becoming a technology leader in its own right. We're working on new semiconductor testing methods that could reduce production time by 30%, explained Lon, a recent graduate of Hanoi University of Science and Technology. If successful, we could license this technology to other manufacturers. Minh was impressed. This was exactly the kind of innovation Vietnam needed. Not just implementing foreign designs, but creating proprietary technologies. As he toured the facility, Minh received a call from a government official regarding an upcoming meeting with Vietnam's new leader, To Lam. Since becoming General Secretary of the Vietnamese Communist Party, To Lam had championed an ambitious new era of economic transformation with bold targets. 8% GDP growth in 2025 and double-digit growth from 2026 onward over the next 2 decades, with the vision of Vietnam becoming a developed high-income nation by 2045. This vision faced significant headwinds from the trade tensions, but Lam's administration was responding pragmatically. Rather than choosing sides, Vietnam was engaging actively with both superpowers while pursuing its own development strategy. The call confirmed that Vietnam was taking concrete steps to address American concerns, including stricter enforcement of rules of origin and collaboration with U.S. customs authorities to investigate origin fraud and illegal transshipment. Simultaneously, the government was maintaining strong economic ties with China while diversifying its partnerships. Over the following weeks, Vietnam's delicate balancing act continued. In Washington, Vietnamese diplomats emphasized the country's commitment to balanced and sustainable trade with the U.S., showcasing agreements with American corporations and highlighting Vietnam's strategic importance as a partner in diversifying supply chains away from China. Meanwhile, business links with China remained robust, with new investments flowing into Vietnamese manufacturing. Vietnam's textile sector, which depended heavily on Chinese inputs while sending half of its exports to the U.S., illustrated the challenge. The industry was working to raise its localization rate above 50% and expand raw material imports from alternative markets like Pakistan and Thailand, a difficult but necessary evolution. For Vintech and thousands of other Vietnamese businesses, this period of adjustment brought both pain and progress. Some orders were lost as uncertainties lingered, but the push toward higher value-added production accelerated innovation. Minh's company invested in advanced training for its workforce and explored new technologies that could differentiate its products. By mid-2025, Vietnam's efforts had begun to bear fruit. Following intensive negotiations, the U.S. agreed to reduce the proposed tariff rate significantly, acknowledging Vietnam's steps to address trade concerns. Meanwhile, investments from American technology companies increased, attracted by Vietnam's growing expertise in electronics manufacturing and its strategic position in Asian supply chains. One morning, as Minh reviewed the quarterly results with his executive team, he reflected on how the trade tensions had ultimately strengthened Vietnam's economic foundation. 6 months ago, we faced potential disaster with the threatened tariffs, he noted. Today, our production is more self-sufficient, our workforce more skilled, and our products more sophisticated. Sometimes pressure creates diamonds. Tran smiled at the metaphor. Our reliance on Chinese imports has decreased from 65% to 48%, and we've increased exports to the EU by 22%. The diversification strategy is working. Vietnam's broader economic indicators told a similar story. While growth had slowed slightly from the ambitious 8% target, the economy was becoming more balanced and resilient. Foreign direct investment remained strong, with new projects focused on higher value production rather than simple assembly. Most significantly, Vietnam had established itself as more than just a manufacturing alternative to China. It was emerging as an innovation hub in its own right, with growing research and development activities in electronics, renewable energy, and digital services. As Minh looked out at Hanoi's skyline from his office window once more, he saw not just the physical transformation of Vietnam's capital, but the evolution of a nation charting its own path amid global economic currents. Between the giants of global trade, Vietnam had found not just challenges but opportunities, leveraging its position to accelerate its development journey. The U.S.-China trade war had thrust Vietnam into the spotlight, but the country's response reflected centuries of experience in navigating complex international relationships. Rather than becoming merely a pawn in a great power competition, Vietnam was writing its own economic story, one that balanced external pressures with national aspirations. For companies like Vintech and the millions of Vietnamese workers they employed, this meant continuing to adapt and innovate. The future remained uncertain, with global trade tensions unlikely to disappear soon, but Vietnam had demonstrated its ability to thrive amid complexity. As the sun set over Hanoi that evening, casting a golden light over ancient temples and modern skyscrapers alike, Minh considered how Vietnam's current economic navigation reflected its long history. Throughout centuries, Vietnam had maintained its identity while engaging with powerful neighbors and distant partners. Today's economic balancing act was, in many ways, a modern expression of that enduring national character. In the delicate dance between economic superpowers, Vietnam had found not just survival but opportunity, transforming external pressure into internal strength. Between giants, it had discovered its own path forward. Key vocabulary, repeated throughout. 1. Trade war, an economic conflict where countries impose tariffs or other restrictions on each other's imports. 2. Tariffs, taxes imposed on imported goods and services. 3. Supply chain, the network of organizations, people, activities, information, and resources involved in delivering a product from supplier to customer. 4. Manufacturing hub, a central location where manufacturing activities are concentrated. 5. Trade surplus, when a country exports more than it imports. 6. Value addition, the enhancement added to a product during each stage of its production. 7. Foreign direct investment, FDI investment made by a company or individual from one country into business interests in another country. 8. Diversification, the practice of varying investments or business activities to reduce risk. 9. Rules of origin, laws, regulations, and procedures used to determine where a product is made. 10. Economic transformation, fundamental changes in a country's economic structure. 11. Semiconductor, electronic component made from materials that conduct electricity under specific conditions. 12. Strategic position, advantageous location or stance in relation to competitors or partners. 13. Trade imbalance, unequal trade relationship between countries. 14. Economic resilience, the ability of an economy to withstand or recover from shocks. 15. Innovation hub, a location that attracts innovative companies and research activities. 16. Geopolitical tensions, conflicts arising from geographical politics between countries. 17. Diplomatic relations, official relationships between countries. 18. Economic sanctions, commercial and financial penalties applied by one country against another. 19. Trade negotiations, discussions between countries to resolve trade issues. 20. Economic interdependence, when economies rely on each other through trade and investment. Thank you for joining us for today's story-driven English episode, Vietnam, Between Giants, a tale of economic navigation. We hope this story has not only improved your English vocabulary and listening skills, but also provided valuable insights into the complex economic dynamics shaping our world today. Through Minh's journey and Vietnam's strategic positioning between economic superpowers, we've explored concepts like trade wars, supply chains, and economic resilience, all while enhancing your English comprehension through natural storytelling. Did you find this story interesting? Which vocabulary words were new to you? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's lesson, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with friends who are also looking to improve their English through engaging content. Your support helps our community grow and allows us to create more quality educational stories. Don't forget to subscribe to Story Driven English and hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads of stories and news-based English lessons. Our channel is dedicated to helping you learn English naturally through compelling narratives about current events, business, technology, and global affairs. Join us next week when we'll explore another fascinating story designed to expand your English vocabulary and understanding of today's world. Remember, the best way to master a language is through consistent practice and engagement with meaningful content. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you in our next story adventure.